Over on Jaguar 8, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about a controversy that took place during the 1992 season between ESPN and Rice University. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. A while ago, I made a video about this running back right here, Oregon running back Ricky Whittle, and how he entered the NFL in just about the dumbest way imaginable. After he got drafted in the 4th round of the 1996 NFL Draft, he proceeded to bash the running backs on the New Orleans Saints, and in no uncertain terms, say that they all stunk and had no business starting, which is rich, seeing as he hadn't even spent one day in the facility yet, or had seen them in person, or knew who they were. And it looked even stupider in hindsight when you realize that Whittle played a grand total of 1 season in the NFL and finished his career with 52 rushing yards and no touchdowns. So he had about as much of an impact in the NFL as you, the viewer watching this wherever you are, did. If you want to learn more about Whittle and the absolutely idiotic comment that he made that backfired in spectacular fashion, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And folks, have we got another story like that for you today? Because this player right here is Green Bay Packers running back and Northern Illinois alum LeShon Johnson. When he came into the NFL, I think a lot of people, both in Green Bay's front office and in terms of fans, were happy and excited to see what he could do. And all of that excitement and hype quickly disappeared after one comment, which left everyone scratching their heads and collectively wondering, oh no, what the heck are you doing? Because when you break down the comment that he made after the draft, and especially put it in context with what he wound up doing in the NFL, oh man, this is bad. This is really, really bad. Because this is the story behind LeShon Johnson, and what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest draft pick and the dumbest draft comment in the history of the Green Bay Packers organization. Before I talk about the comment in question and what exactly Johnson did, we need some context to understand, well, just who LeShon Johnson is, and why the Packers were considering drafting him. The year is 1993, and one of the most feared runners in all of college football is none other than this man right here, LeShon Johnson out of Northern Illinois, who was so good that he was named a consensus All-America selection. It's funny because Northern Illinois was not a good team at all during the 1993 season, as they finished the year with a 4-7 record and an offense that ranked in the bottom half of all of Division 1A. However, despite that, and despite playing in the Big West, which is not exactly a conference that garners national attention, everyone seemed to know who LeShon Johnson was, as he took the college football world by storm. During the 1993 season, Johnson had 1,976 rushing yards, averaging a whopping 179.6 yards per game, which was not just the top total in the Big West, but was the best total in the entire NCAA. His 1,976 rushing yards was a Northern Illinois record for a single season, and it was boosted by the fact that he set a school record by having 3 consecutive games with at least 200 yards rushing. Despite only playing 2 seasons with the program, Johnson ended his career 4th all-time in rushing yards. For those wondering, the top guy was Mark Keller, who I did a video on regarding his draft status in 1974, so you can learn more about him by clicking the card in the upper right corner. In just 2 seasons, he had 15 games with at least 100 yards rushing, and 5 games with at least 200 yards rushing, which set the school record at the time. And he was a big play threat too, with 3 runs going for over 80 yards. Get him in space, and he's gone, as both Southern Illinois and Iowa found out during that 1993 season, when he had 300-plus yard performances, with a 322-yard game setting the school record at the time for most rushing yards in a game. Long story short, after Johnson led the Big West in rushing yards, yards from scrimmage, and rushing touchdowns, he ended the year 6th in the Heisman voting. It is insanely rare for any player on a losing team to come inside the top 6 in the Heisman voting, let alone a player who plays for a smaller school like NIU that might not get a ton of national attention. Yet here was Johnson, who many would argue, outside of Marshall Faulk, was the best running back in the country in 1993. And he was so good that entering the 1994 NFL Draft, he was projected not just as a high draft pick, but as a top 10 draft pick. By late January, Mel Kiper said, "I've spent the whole year comparing Marshall Faulk to Barry Sanders. Tell ya, after seeing LeShon Johnson today, he's got to be put or talked about in the same area as a game-breaking Super Blue chipper who skyrocketed from mid-first round to the top 10. LeShon Johnson went from a 15th to 20th pick into the top 10. Kiper called him an unsung hero at the Senior Bowl during practices, and as the draft process went on, Johnson was considered an intriguing option by a ton of teams, including the Buffalo Bills, who called him one of the best running backs in the Midwest, and the Chicago Bears, who played just 1 hour away from NIU, with head coach Dave Wannstedt saying that Johnson did a great job. And even as the draft was getting closer, Kiper had Johnson as one of his top 4 running backs on the board, alongside Marshall Faulk, Eric Rhett, and James Bostic. Another draft expert said that Johnson was in the same mold as Gale Sayers or Walter Payton, and had him going 11th to the Bears. Another publication had Johnson as the second best running back in the class, saying that Johnson wouldn't be running out the first round for long, and would hear his name early. And even the most conservative mocks still had Johnson going super early, with the Philadelphia Inquirer listing him as a top 50 prospect and saying that he was a terrific outside runner with breakaway speed. Which is why it came as a massive shock to everyone when, as the draft progressed, Johnson did not hear his name called. He was expected by many to be the second running back off the board after Marshall Faulk. Instead, only 2 running backs went in round 1, and neither one of them were named LeShon Johnson. As a side note, to learn more about Greg Hill, the other running back from that 1994 class that was drafted in round 1, click the card in the upper right corner. 5 running backs were chosen in the second round, but none of them were named LeShon Johnson. It took until pick number 84 in the 3rd round, when Johnson, as the 11th running back, finally got to hear his name get called, and finally got to realize his dream of being an NFL player, way later than just about everyone thought. He thought for sure that he was going early, and thought that the hometown Bears would call his name, based on discussions that he had with his agent. Instead, he goes to their rival. Maybe some scouts were scared off by his shoulder injury, but Johnson was going to use this as motivation and as a chip on his shoulder. After being passed over by the Bears 3 times, and being passed over by the closest NFL team to the campus of Northern Illinois, the Bears were public enemy number 1. As he said, "We play them 2 times. They will pay for it. That's all I can say." Alright, we love a guy with confidence that uses his draft slide as motivation. He understands the assignment as a Packer player. Hate the Bears. It's that simple. And considering the fact that the Packers didn't have a great running game in 1993, finishing 22nd in the league out of 28 teams in rushing yards, and with the leading rusher being the highly disappointing former first-round pick Darrell Thompson, who only had 654 yards, this seemed like a pretty solid pick, especially since he was projected as a first-rounder by many. They were getting a first-round talent in the middle of the 3rd round. So we're off to a great start. And then Johnson decided to open his mouth some more, which is where things all kind of fell apart. See this player right here? This is Reggie Cobb, who was a former 2nd-round pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 1990 NFL Draft. And Cobb was coming off of some pretty decent production down in Tampa, even though the Bucs were not a very good team during his tenure. During the 1992 season, Cobb had 1,171 rushing yards, which was just the 3rd time in Bucs history, alongside Ricky Bell in 1979 and James Wilder in 1985, that a Buccaneer had over 1,000 rushing yards in a season. In his 4 seasons with the Bucs, he had 3,061 rushing yards, which was the second most in franchise history, only behind Wilder. Yes, he had more rushing yards than Ricky Bell did, and during that 1992 season, he not only finished 7th in the league in rushing yards, but finished 5th in rushing touchdowns, when he found the end zone 9 times, more than doubling the next closest player on the team in touchdowns. Prior to the start of the draft, the Packers signed Cobb to a 2-year contract, and general manager Ron Wolf was extremely high on the former 1,000-yard rusher, especially since the Packers played the Bucs twice a year in the NFC Central. As Wolf said, with Reggie Cobb, now we have the type of back that we need to compete very favorably within the NFC Central. I think certainly in our offense, as in Tampa's offense, he has a great chance to be a 1,000-yard rusher. So what did Johnson say about going to the Packers and competing for that starting job alongside Cobb? If he said something like, Cobb is a great running back, and I'm hoping to learn a lot from him, fine. If he said something like, I'm looking forward to competing with him in camp, fine. If he said something like, Cobb complements my game well, and I think we'll have a great rushing attack, fine. If he said something like, Cobb is a veteran who's done this for a while at a high level, so he's going to add a lot to this running back room, fine. Basically, anything besides what he ended up saying would have been fine and a complete non-story. Because LeShon Johnson said, for some reason, I've watched Reggie Cobb play. I don't think a lot of running backs in the NFL can touch me. Yep, that's right. LeShon Johnson thought it was a good idea, before even stepping foot in Green Bay, to trash his own teammate, who was a 1,000-yard rusher, mind you, and was the second best running back statistically in the short history of the Buccaneers, and say that he was not very good. He decided to say, I've seen Cobb. He stinks. I'm better than him, no doubt about it. I mean, why did you think this was a good idea? On what planet did you think, before even stepping foot in the NFL, that bashing an NFL player who's your teammate and a guy who was 1 year removed from a 1,000-yard season was a good idea? You're a rookie. You don't know what NFL speed is like. You don't know how the NFL works. You haven't paid your dues. And to bash a veteran, an awfully good one at that that's accomplished a lot, is just not the right way to go about it. You know it's bad when even Ron Wolf, the man who was high on you and drafted you, had to rein you in and bash you for being stupid. Said Wolf after hearing those comments, it's not a real easy situation for a young man to come in here and start. He's got a heck of a back in front of him, and I think he'll realize that when he gets here. Translation, you have no idea what you just said. You've got a lot to learn. Reggie Cobb's been doing this for a while, kid, and he's awfully good at this. You haven't done anything yet. Maybe learn a bit from the man who was one of the best runners in the NFL while you were a junior in college, instead of bashing him right away. There's a fine line between being confident in your abilities and being cocky to the point of being stupid, and Johnson was about 20 steps over that line. But hey, maybe even though this comment looks really bad, it won't look bad in hindsight. Maybe Johnson becomes this great runner, blows Reggie Cobb out of the water, and does way better than Cobb ever did in his career, making his 1,171-yard, 9-touchdown season, where he was near the top of the NFL in both categories, look like child's play. So, okay, I'll give you a chance to back up your talk and to put your money where your mouth is. Come on, LeShon. Show me what you got.
LeShon Johnson checks in. He's in the backfield. And he can't find his footing. And he meets some of the Bears' defenders.
Oh, crap. This guy sucks. Yep. Want to know what LeShon Johnson's final stat line was with the Packers? He was off the team midway through the 1995 season and finished his Green Bay career with 97 rushing yards and no touchdowns. That's it. If you're watching this video, congratulations. you had as many rushing touchdowns with the Packers as LeShon Johnson did. If you take out his 43-yard run that he had in garbage time during a 1994 game against the Bears, which accounted for nearly half of his rushing yards with the Packers, he had 25 carries for 56 yards, or just 2.24 yards per carry. Johnson bounced around a few teams, including a last-ditch effort in the XFL of all places with the Chicago Enforcers, and then got arrested for dogfighting. So yeah, his career was kinda terrible in more ways than one. Reggie Cobb only played one season in Green Bay, but he had 6 times the rushing yards with the Packers than Johnson did. Really good job there comparing yourself to Cobb, considering the fact that you couldn't even hold Cobb's jockstrap. And I'm fairly sure a ton of other running backs in the NFL could touch him, in his words, seeing as he had 99 rushing yards as a rookie, meaning that there were 89 players who had more rushing yards than he did that season. Said Johnson in the middle of his 1994 season, "I'm not as far as I should be, but that's just part of the game." A far cry from, "There's not many running backs that can touch me, and I've seen the competition." Talk about an attitude change. So to any potential draft pick who may be watching this video, if you need some advice on what to do and what to say when you get drafted, you can be complimentary, you can be confident, and you can use your pick and your draft status as motivation. That is totally fine. Go for it. But don't bash your own teammates and bash other players in the NFL who paved the way for you and who have paid their dues and know what they're doing. That is not a smart idea at all, as LeShon Johnson found out in 1994. Basically, think of what LeShon Johnson did, and then do the exact opposite. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.